with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of truth, a dimension of freedom, a dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Welcome to the Capitalist Corner, folks. Do I sound all right? Can everybody hear me? I'm getting kind of a weird echo here. Let me see if I got my mic set properly. I do. Welcome everyone to the Capitalist Corner. As you can see, we got the great Jim Valliant with us today in lieu of the wonderful Mark Pellegrino's absence. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this program. Share it from YouTube. And also remember that we are not affiliated with the American Capitalist Party, although Mark is the chairman and I am the vice chairman. So today, I just want to get started. Today is the birthday of an absolute hero of mine, brilliant guy, someone that's had a profound impact on my thinking. So let's all wish happy birthday to the great James Stevens Valliant.
I thought you were going to say the great Ludwig von Mises.
I set it up that way, Jim. And I wanted to say this publicly because, Jim, I absolutely love you. I adore you. You are one of my absolute best friends in the world. It's great to honor you on your birthday. Not a lot of people perhaps know, but there was a time when I was really going to battle with some objectivists online. They, any little disagreement that I had with them, they flaked out. You embraced me nevertheless, and I will always appreciate it. And you also told me when I told you, listen, if I disagree with you, Jim, I told you I'm going to disagree with you. I'll never pretend. And you told me, don't you dare. And that, sir, is the gift that not many people get. So, Jim, happy birthday from me, and I'm sure the entire audience who loves you, a happy birthday from them as well.
Wow, thank you. I feel the same way about you.
Thank you, sir.
We can have our disagreements, but that's part of the cool nature of our relationship, is that we can see past it. I was just telling you about conversations I've had with Dr. Leonard Peikoff recently. We'll be arguing about something like immigration, where we definitely disagree, and but I'll stop and I'll say, Leonard, we can disagree about this. It doesn't affect our friendship. This is because you can make the distinction. He understands, as I understand, as you understand, that moral integrity, being true to yourself, is much more important than a disagreement over which reasonable minds might be able to disagree. I treasure my friendship with you, and I feel very much the same. You're one of my best friends ever because of your integrity, my dear brother. And I can't wait to see you soon because you're coming to San Diego.
Oh, absolutely. And we are going to the zoo come hell or high water.
Yes,
I missed out on the zoo last time. It was great. We went to Balboa Park, but I'm going to the freaking zoo. Now, we talk about this disagreement thing, and it's very interesting because my best friend, Brent McCall, he who is on the cup, he and our friendship was forged with disagreements all the time. And I thrive, Jim. I love intellectual disagreement where somebody is sticking to the rules of logic and arguing effectively. It's a pet peeve of mine, and I have to confess that it irks me more than I ought to let it, is when engaged in a discussion and somebody gives me not very good arguments. Now, I'm not a person that says if you disagree with me, you are making a bad argument. I understand that one of us may have a skewed premise somewhere in the chain, and that causes a disagreement, but the logic and the loyalty to empirics, that sort of thing, is all still there. So the other night I get a phone call from a friend of mine. I was watching a movie with Diana, and the phone rang, and I didn't answer it because I was watching a show. And then he called back, and I'm thinking, wow, this might be important. So then I call him, and he says, dude, you come off as a leftist sometimes. He says, you usually come off as a leftist in your post. And I'm like, dude, like I'm aggravated now with this because Jim, I tell my friends and family who are not philosophically or politically astute, and that's fine. But this is my living, right? This is what I do. I cannot have them coming and posting stuff on my page and I just let it slide. So I've told them, don't put me in this position. I don't want to make you look bad. Please don't do this. So he called, and when he said that to me, Jim, I said to him, look, I said, the only people that think I'm a leftist are people who simply don't know what they're talking about. He said, no, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm telling you, you sound like a leftist. And so then he says, I'll tell you what, why don't you ask me some questions? Now I'm irritated because you're screwing up my night with this nonsense. Right now, I've known this guy 40 years. And you're screwing up my evening now to talk. Like, you're not calling to see how I'm doing, want to get a cup of coffee. You're calling to basically slam me, and you don't know what you're talking about. So he says, ask whatever questions you want. So I said, okay. First question, what's supply side economics? That should be easy. You're claiming you're on the right side of the aisle. This has been the Republican theory of economics since the 70s. What is it? Can't answer it. I said, okay. You've identified me as a leftist. You should know what Keynesian economics is then, because that's the economics of the Democrats. Nope, doesn't know what that is. I said, okay. What is strict constructionism when it comes to the Constitution? Again, doesn't know. So then I said to him, look, I said, well, what is the doctrine of the living Constitution? Then he says to me, oh, yeah. He said, I know what that is. And I absolutely know that the Constitution is a living, breathing document.
He's the leftist.
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
First, he doesn't really know the difference between leftist and right.
No.
And the
Right.
other thing is that when the chips fall, turns out he's more of a leftist than you are.
Yes. So then he said, then I asked him, okay, well, where are you on tariffs? Big tariff guy. I said, okay, until 2016, the Republicans were free trade. Right.
On the Constitution, on economics, he's
right.
the leftist.
Right. Last thing is this. He says to me, the Federal Reserve should absolutely be lowering interest rates. We need lower interest rates. Now, he's a big Charlie Kirk fan. So I asked him, I said, did you happen to catch the debate where Charlie Kirk told an economics student that if he had not been taught Mises, Rothbard, Hayek, and Friedman, then he's not being taught economics? He said, oh, yeah, I saw that one. I said, okay, without me saying a damn thing, just go Google those guys and see what they would say about your position about the Federal Reserve manipulating interest rates to keep them artificially low.
Mises and Hayek on the business.
Yeah. It's like, Jesus Christ.
That's a clue, my friend.
But here's the key. This is the key. You know, I think Nathaniel Branden coined it. Rand might have coined it. Social metaphysics, where your viewpoints are not gained by looking at reality, but looking at other people. This friend of mine, and this I'm going to answer, I like numbers. I like numbers asked me, why do so many people share the misperception of you being on the left? One, because they don't know what they're talking about. Usually their political lives began with Donald Trump. Two, because they take Donald Trump as their source of reality. He's their reality. It's Trumpian metaphysics. I criticize the Trump, and I usually criticize him from the right, by the way. If we're going to go by what's traditional, I criticize him from the right when it comes to property rights, economics, constitutionalism, freedoms, whatever.
25 years ago, I was in the same exact boat as you. I would be criticizing George W. Bush. One, I oppose the way he approaches 9/11 and the reaction to it. Two, he totally betrayed us on Social Security. He was going to attempt to do something to privatize Social Security, and he stabbed us in the effing back on doing anything about entitlements. And so I'm raging about what? Privatizing Social Security, and we don't have a properly strong response. We're fighting the wrong wars and the wrong people. And okay, and what do they call me? An obleftivist. I think the term obleftivist might have been coined for me some 24 years ago. But what I was doing is criticizing George W. Bush from what I thought was a more consistently pro-capitalist position. And
Yes.
I'm being called an obleftivist.
Yeah. And that's so, when I get this online, it's one thing, because if somebody comes to me and insults me online and I don't know them and they're ridiculous, I don't feel bad if I make a fool out of them. I really don't. I'd prefer, rational discussion, but I don't feel bad if a stranger is going to be a dick. I really don't feel bad on making him look ridiculous.
No.
But when it's my friends and family, and I ask you nicely, please do not put me in this position, and they insist on it. Okay. And Diana said to me, that wasn't nice. What you said to him, my girlfriend. And I said, look, if he's not going to have the respect for me to not do that to me, I owe him nothing in those circumstances.
In fact, you owe him a similar response.
Yes.
Diana, you're a sweetheart, and I love the way you love humanity and give people the doubt. She is a sweetheart. On the other hand, I do have to take your side mostly on this point, because come on, if that person has gone out of the way to publicly disagree with you in that kind of a way, they have set themselves up. The just response is for you to respond in kind. Wait a minute, you're misrepresenting this. Are you even aware of that? And then, oh no, well, dude, you may not realize it, but you're the leftist.
Yes. Yeah. So the conversation ended with him telling me he's actually a Christian nationalist, and I'm not sure he knows what that is. But anyways, so that's my personal weekend aggravation. But there's also news going on, Jim.
Yes.
And you are used to be a prosecutor. I guess you call yourself a lawyer or something. Maybe you took the bar, maybe you didn't. But anyway,
I took the bar past the first time. What are you talking about? I was a litigator for almost 18 years. Yes.
And an absolutely devastating debater. So I don't run around saying that about people, by the way. There's two people in my life, that since I've been in the public eye, I should say, because I've debated people in personal, but in my public debates, there's the two people, and I'll say it again, that I've absolutely had the hardest time with are Jim Valliant and David Friedman. And I'm sure you don't mind being when it comes to debating, to being in the same class as Dr. Friedman.
Not at all. Wow. Thank you. In fact, that's one of the cool things about our relationship. Some of my best friends, and that includes you, are people with whom I can have a knockdown, drag out disagreement.
Right.
They'll walk away shaking hands. I love your brother. It's not going to affect our long-term relationship, no matter how heated the discussion was. But thank you very much. You are outstanding. That's the other thing we share in common. You're an outstanding interlocutor. You are a great debater. You make my arguments better. Even on the UK.
That's what should happen.
Yeah.
If you're in a debate with somebody, the person should should push you to the limits where you have to think and either change your mind or come up with a better argument, right? So anyway, so we got the indictment of Jim Comey. I read the indictment. It was pretty flimsy. 2 pages, didn't really make much sense. I find that it's not about what most people think it's about. They think it's about the Russia investigation. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. And I read a couple. I like to go to traditional conservatives on this type of stuff, because then of course, they end up just getting called rhinos and sellouts or whatever. But Andy McCarthy wrote an excellent piece for the National Review where he just shredded this indictment. He said, look, first of all, their witness, because it's speculating in part because the indictment says person 1 and person 3. So what it seems, based on the context, is that it has to do with leaking the investigation about Hillary Clinton's email server. It was leaked by Andrew McCabe. And the accusation, it appears, is that Comey gave McCabe permission to leak it, and then Comey lied about it in a 2020 Senate hearing to Senator Ted Cruz. First problem, Andy McCabe was found by the Inspector General to be woefully unreliable, to be lying, misrepresenting things. Secondly, he never said that Comey told him ahead of time he could release it. All he said was that afterwards he told Comey, and Comey told him that it was okay. But Comey even says, no, that's not true. But the Inspector General said Comey's the one who is believable about this. Then there was another hiccup in this where evidently I'm finding more stuff out. This Halligan that Trump has appointed as the prosecutor was his defense attorney. She's never prosecuted anything. She hands the judge 2 indictments, one of which evidently is from one of the charges that was dismissed. So it doesn't come off as it being a unified grand jury decision. The judge says to her, what's going on here? I've never seen this in my life. And she says, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't seen that one. And he says, well, you signed it. And she says, oh, well, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yes, a total clown show. She says, I hadn't done it yet. So the speculation is that this should be dismissed, and they say it should be dismissed on 2 counts. 1, selective prosecution, what was the first one, and which means that you picked this guy out. And I can't even remember. The other one is vindictive prosecution or something. And the problem here is Trump is giving them the case because he can't stay vindictive prosecution. Yes, Ian, thank you. He can't stop running his mouth, pronouncing Comey guilty, saying he's a dirty cop, he's a scumbag, he's this, he went after me. Kash Patel's out there saying he went after Trump, all of which has nothing to do with the current case. So now, Jim, that I've gotten to run my mouth for a few minutes, you go ahead and run yours.
Well, that was you did a great summary and briefing the facts of this, actually.
Thank you.
It is a layer cake of irony, isn't it? I mean, just full on layer cake of irony. Okay. Getting a selective prosecution or vindictive prosecution dismissal is really hard for the defense because prosecutors and cops do have some degree of discretion. But boy, is Mr. Trump making the case. It would be a very difficult legal burden to show vindictive or selective prosecution. That rarely gets the case dismissed. I mean, I think Mr. Trump may have tried it in his New York case and it didn't fly. But the point is, getting a selective or vindictive prosecution dismissal is a tough thing to get. The judge will point out, prosecutors have discretion, et cetera, let him do his job. Are you guilty is really the only question. Mr. Trump is doing what and I've long complained about this, whether it's mayors, governors, prosecutors, presidents. Look, if there's an investigation or a criminal case pending, keep your effing mouth shut. You only hurt and prejudice the case. You prejudice potential jurors. You create an issue on appeal. Keep your mouth shut. Let it happen in court, where things are supposed to be revealed and happen, and where the admissibility can be tested, legally speaking. So I am just up to here with executives giving us their personal opinion on pending criminal cases. And if anything can get the vindictive prosecution thing through, it would be statements from on high, the chief magistrate of the land, Donald Trump, saying, I think you should, this is what it is. And he's the guy, at the top of the executive branch levers.
Jim, hold on 1 second. I want to ask this question before it goes out of my head. And then I want you to be flexible enough to come back.
Okay.
Wouldn't Trump have also had a case for selective prosecution? And like you said, they're so hard to get because of the fact that Hillary wasn't indicted and then Biden wasn't indicted, both who basically did the same thing. Now, that's not to say that he shouldn't have been indicted, because probably all 3 should have. But nevertheless, it was selective. I mean, or a case could have been made, I should say.
Yes. Okay. The truth of going back to it, the way that the right is selling this, again, loaded with irony, is this is the guy, behind all of the false allegations against Trump. Yeah, but that's not what this case has anything to do with. This has to do with the Hillary Clinton case. Okay, so but boy, it reveals their animus. Why on the right they want to get James Comey. Now, back in 2016, when James Comey said no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute Hillary Clinton, and I raised my hand. I said, well, you've got her dead to rights, destroying evidence. If destroying evidence doesn't do it, I'm not sure what could do it. So Mr. Comey, in my view, did politicize the FBI, did let Hillary Clinton off the hook. But this case is, as Andy McCabe points out, is total.
And Andy McCarthy, you mean?
Andy McCarthy. I'm thinking of the guy. Well, the truth is here, either, and this is what we're talking about, a leak, like you're pointing out, either Andy McCabe, Andrew McCabe, I don't know him, Andrew McCabe or James Comey lied. But who lied? Neither of them are credible. And in my view, when I'm considering a perjury case or a lying to Congress case, which is what this is, I have to say I have to be able to prove who really was the liar. It's not just, well, this guy who's not so credible could have lied. This guy contradicts him who's not so credible could have lied. That's
but Jim, even if McCabe is telling the truth, it doesn't mean, because what they're saying he lied about was authorizing. But McCabe didn't even say that Comey authorized him to do so.
But the point is, that the subject is, forget the case for a second. The subject is the testimony. One guy said he said that even after the fact. The other guy said, no, I didn't. So even if it's just after the fact, you can still catch them on the lie before Congress. And so I know one of two guys lied before Congress. But neither of them are credible, and it depends on who you think is more credible, and they're both not credible. That means you don't file a charge against either one. How I was taught as a prosecutor. Take a simple drug case. The cops stop a car, right? There's drugs found on the floorboard underneath one of the seats, and all four of the people in the car say, the dope isn't mine, the dope isn't mine. What do? You can't prosecute any of them because you can't prove knowledge on the part of any of them. They're all pointing fingers at the other guy. And that's the similar case here. Which, in effect, person in the car knew about the drugs, if anyone? And the driver will say, I was just borrowing my car from my friend. None of us knew that the drugs were on the floorboard of the car. And if that's the evidentiary situation, very similar. And that's why, Andrew, the prosecutor, not McCabe, McCarthy, said that this is a weak case, and I fully agree with him. This is not the kind of long before Congress case that has much merit. I don't see, it's not good. Then you add to it the layer of the prosecutor who has zero prosecution experience. It is a specialization. It is, and she hasn't prosecuted a suspended license or DUI case. I mean, in her entire life, she's not done criminal prosecution, and it is a specialization. Look, if my lawyer came in and said, I've never done a criminal case in my life, I would want another lawyer. If I was the government and I'm hiring a former defense attorney, have you ever actually investigated or prosecuted a criminal case? No.
Jim, let me ask you this. Is it significant, as these articles that I've read make it seem, but I've never been a prosecutor, is it significant that no other prosecutors in the Justice Department signed off on this?
Yes, it is. In other words, the professionals who know what the standards of case issuance are. I mean, look at that indictment. That is a rookie mistake. She signed and presented an indictment before a judge. And gee, I don't know. What after all, what's in it? Duh. Oh my God. My God, that is like prosecution 101 when you're presenting your grand jury indictment and you've signed off on it. You say, yes, we're going to file charges because the grand jury, found a true indictment. Oh my God. That is really, really bad basic stuff. So you've got an incompetent prosecutor, probably hired for reasons none of the other professionals in the Justice Department would touch the case. So Trump had to, through his vindictive selective that's another thing that goes to vindictive and selective prosecution. The person he put in to this position just for this purpose. I hate it when Letitia James runs for Attorney General of New York. This is another thing that I hate. I'm going to get person X.
Yep.
It is not people we prosecute, but crimes we prosecute. It should be unethical at the highest level to run for a law enforcement position saying, I'm going to prosecute, I'm going to select out. But Trump is now behaving at least as bad as any of those political, the right was complaining as they were going after Trump. It's pure political prosecution. And in many cases, they had a great argument. But now Trump is acting even worse than they did in terms of politicizing the Justice Department. So, and what he's saying is just outrageous.
Now, I'm glad you brought up Letitia James, because I've actually there's two comments here that I want to address. The first one seems to be a pro-Trump comment. This comment says Trump got charged with things no one had ever been prosecuted for.
True.
Okay. I want to but I do that on its own. Does not mean that the prosecutions were unjust.
That is true. There's
Right.
always
So,
first case.
I want to just look at things. So you brought up Letitia James.
Yeah.
She runs for office on the idea that she's going to go get Trump.
Yes.
She then comes up with this creative prosecution based on money given to Stormy Daniels. Is it an in-kind, a contribution or whatever? It was BS. It was BS from my reading about it and from my talking to professionals about it, like you, Dr. Ilya Soman, the great Richard Epstein, Harvey Silverstein. I mean, the people that I talk to about this, let me just say, they're not pikers.
No.
Right.
And there was agreement from the best legal minds in the country that it was a trumped up, unusual prosecution, very creative. Let me put it this way. The federal election people said, no, we wouldn't file on this.
Right.
So it's not the state's business, really, but they somehow shoehorned it into both being a felony to get away with the statute of limitations.
Right, and then they didn't actually name the felony. It was real convoluted. So this was BS.
You're talking about a hokey prosecution.
Right.
And
okay.
New York should have dismissed it.
Now, the other state case, the Georgia case.
Yes.
I don't know how strong it was, but there was certainly evidence. That's all I'm saying is there was evidence.
There was evidence.
Now, I understand that those types of conversations are subject to interpretation. You know, him saying, find me the votes, he could be saying the votes are out there, go find them.
And on ambiguities, the benefit of the doubt goes to
right. So those are those two.
Proving it beyond a reasonable doubt. So the state, with the burden of proving it to reasonable certainty, has to be able to say, no, it ain't a judgment call like that. I can prove. And so that's where I would say, and you could tell that there was a political motive behind Fani Willis's prosecution. There was no doubt she too was politically motivated.
Fani? I thought it's Fanny. Fani?
I think the way you pronounce it is Fani, but it's spelled Fanny. You know, the class.
Maybe you're right. Okay, so I'm in agreement with you so far. The New York case was bogus. The Georgia case was ambiguous, and likely, you know, I think that most of this stuff is politically motivated. That doesn't mean that there's not a crime committed, though.
That is true.
Right. Okay.
And Comey in clearing Hillary was politically motivated. In clearing Hillary was politically.
We're going to get to her on the next comment.
But it doesn't matter whether it's clearing, charging,
right? But I want to discuss Hillary in a minute. But okay, so there's two more cases for Trump. To me, the absolute strongest case, and it seems to me unequivocal that he was guilty, was the taking of the classified documents and then obstructing. He actually had a conversation that he was caught on tape saying he knew he couldn't declassify them after the fact. Right. There was that. There was the moving around of the boxes. There was all types of stuff that showed not only that he did it, but that he had knowledge of guilt. And his claim that he can just declassify things by just saying it was pure BS. Yeah. So to me, that was the strongest case.
Yes.
And I think he was guilty. And
And
now Harvey Silverstein.
But I hate to do Me Tooism, but Joe Biden and Hillary.
We're going to get to that, Jim. You're going to drive me crazy in a minute because that's the next thing. You always do that. You jump ahead when I'm trying to do something here. So Harvey Silverstein, actually, and I'm curious what you think about that. He told me that he felt even if they thought Trump was guilty, they should have waited till after the election to charge him. Yeah. And his point was this: look, if he wins, he's going to pardon himself, so it doesn't matter. And if he loses, you can charge him down the line. So why the rush? Why to do that? And he basically insinuated, and I think he's right, it was to impact the election.
That's it. That's why the Justice Department and most prosecution agencies have rules against bringing cases against candidates a certain period before the election. You want to stay out of the politics. So I think the whole year before the election would be a bad idea. And besides, if it doesn't affect statute of limitations, why don't we just wait so that no one can say it was politically motivated? If you wait until after the election and then file charges, it's like, you see, we didn't want this to affect the election. We only have a charge. And we weren't going to get a conviction before the election. So we didn't file until after the election. There, I must agree. That has to be the generalized approach. And that was not the approach taken with Trump, I understand. But you're right. I think he was guilty. I think Hillary should have been prosecuted. Trump should have been prosecuted. Biden.
Jim, I'm going to kill you on your birthday if you bring up Hillary one more time before we get to it.
Full on homicide.
Yes. Okay. So, and then I'll be charged. Okay. The last case against Trump, the federal case, which I also think he was guilty, and I think it's the most serious, but I don't know that the evidence was as compelling, is the election case. Importantly, he was never charged with inciting a riot or inciting insurrection or any of that stuff. He was charged, and I don't remember the exact thing, but basically trying to fraudulently steal an election. Now, he absolutely did try to slate alternate electors. And he absolutely was out there saying that it's a stolen election. He was putting all that out there. That's all absolutely correct. Now, to say, well, no one's ever been charged with that before, I don't know that anybody's ever done that before. So,
like I said before, there's always a first case.
Right. So I don't know that I think that the argument that's made on the board that he got charged with things no one was ever prosecuted for, I think the New York case is an obvious example. There, I think that's valid. In the other cases, even in the Georgia one where I agree with you on the ambiguity, I don't think that this applies there because I don't know of any other presidential candidate that did that either. Called up the Secretary of State and said, find me votes.
Yeah, but find me votes, I think, is idiom for we know that there's more votes out there that were cast and stuff. It could be looked at in various
Could be. That's why I agree on the ambiguity, but I don't think that it's...
And on the case about the January 6th case, they had a hard time really proving any intent about causing disruption on January 6th. When it comes to the slating of electors, again, nothing really, since it didn't pan out and come to anything, can he fight as much as he can legally? And do we want to prosecute someone for, even if they're being dishonest, even if it's in bad faith, taking a legal case in bad faith?
Well, that's the key. I like that you said that because there was evidence that he knew.
Yeah. So even if it was in bad faith, fighting a legal case, is that something that we see? And there were other technical issues, a whole list of them. For example, the appointment of the special counsel, was that legal and constitutional? So there were other technical issues, but it was a case of first impression, and I think it would have been a matter of, and again, my rule as a prosecutor is real simple. If it's can go either way, you give the benefit of the doubt to the defendant. I have to prove my case as a prosecutor beyond a reasonable doubt, each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt. And if I have a ambiguity in my head about any of those elements, I'm going to think like the jury ought to be. That's a not guilty vote. If I'm not certain of that element, I must vote not guilty. I will put myself as a prosecutor in the shoes of that juror and say, wait a minute, if there is a doubt, I have to give it to the defendant. And if that's the way, and that's the way prosecutors ought to think. And if that's the case, I say, don't charge. Now, I agree with you in terms of the hierarchical ranking of the solidity of the cases. I think the strongest one was the documents case. And I think, frankly, Trump was in a superior position to Hillary and Biden, for example. Biden was a senator and he was taking documents. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State.
Jim, for the love of everything holy, I'm going to get to it in a minute. Okay. And now we can get to it. So Ian Gilmore says about Hillary and Biden, both of those people complied with the investigation. Trump hid and obstructed. Hillary did not comply.
Yeah.
No, she was hiding.
Destroyed evidence.
Yeah. You remember she did, what do you mean? Wiped it clean with like a cloth?
Exactly.
No, there was missing emails. She was not compliant with the investigation.
And on the
Biden,
they didn't do the,
because he was too demented to.
Yeah. That is, and they attacked her, the special prosecutor, for saying, no, he's too out of it to prosecute. And they said, well, those are what outrageous statements against Biden. I mean, talk about lost up their own leftist fundamental aperture. But the point, though, is,
what did you just say?
Lost up its own fundamental aperture. It's a wonderful line I took from novelist Tom Wolfe that I think is appropriate when people are lost up their own, Anyway,
Is it true that Ayn Rand was not happy with Barbara Brandon because Barbara Brandon liked Tom Wolfe?
That's a new one on me. At least it doesn't. I may have heard about it because I've heard about all these things, but I didn't. I myself like some of Tom Wolfe's works. The Painted Word. I mean, some of his nonfiction is excellent. They made a crappy movie out of Bonfire of the Vanities, which is too bad. I like Tom Wolfe, and maybe that's one thing with Barbara Brandon and I have overlap. On the other hand, is he Ayn Rand? No. Of course he's not. Tom Wolfe was,
No, he's Tom Wolfe.
yeah. But I mean, where there's philosophical disagreement or even aesthetic disagreement, I'm with Ayn Rand, and I probably agree with her. That does not mean I can't find value from his work. Quite the contrary. Now, I don't know if Barbara was arguing with Ayn Rand about, something, he's romantic realism, and Ayn Rand could say, no, that's not romantic realism. I don't know.
Jim, how long does it take usually to bring a case to trial? From arrest to verdict?
It should take less than 6 months for most felonies.
If they file for speedy trial, how long does it actually take?
Oh, it could take 1-2 years. A murder case? That guy could be sitting in a jail cell for 2-3 years before it ever gets to trial.
So when you saw that Trump was initially charged, how long could Trump's lawyers reasonably push this thing forward to trial date?
Well, they could have immediately said we refuse to waive any speedy trial rights, and that
they could force it. But I'm saying if their goal is to not have a trial, how long could they prolong it for?
The government has a speedy trial right, just as a defendant does.
But they very, very rarely push that.
I
believe you have. I know this in my experience when I was going to court, and this wasn't federal. I've known guys who were waiting for trial 3-4 years.
Yeah.
Usually it's over a year. The reason in practice, I know, because guys can file for speedy trial.
Now, the guys you're talking about in prison, if it's destined to prison, if he goes down, those are the ones that will tend to last longer and bring him to trial.
Yes.
So that I don't find surprising at all.
No, the reason I ask is because first, Ian Gilmore, he says Biden did not try to hide anything. Come on, Ian, I'm sorry, brother, but neither one of us said he did. What we said was that they said he was too incompetent. That's what the investigator said. It wasn't that he hid stuff.
The investigator said he was guilty.
But also, Ian comes now and says Trump was charged in the document case in June 2023, more than a year before the election, not more than a year before election season. That's the first thing. And also, there's no doubt in my mind that Trump and his legal team could push that case for at least a year and a half into the future.
That's the question, for sure.
I didn't want to bias you. I wanted you to know you're right. They can file for speedy trial. People generally don't do that. I know people might think, you're in a hurry. They're not.
They're not. And look, if it's a murder trial, if it's a capital murder trial, my God, the court is going to bend over backwards to allow the defense to do a thorough investigation. I can go in there and scream, people have a speedy trial right. The judge will say, Mr. Valliant, this person is facing 20 years in prison. You're going to let the defense attorney do a thorough investigation. And you're going to make sure he can, have you got all your evidence out to him? I'm Mr. Discovery. I give him everything I had the moment I had it.
No, you're Mr. Valliant.
I am Mr. Valliant. But even if I'd given them everything I had the moment I got it myself, the judge is still going to say, look, if they say to me they want to do a retest of the blood for DNA, or if they want to retest some of the physical evidence by their own expert, or they want to have the defendant psychiatrically shrunk, I got to wait. And the judge is going to give them the time to do it. Believe me.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you about, and by the way, Ian Gilmore mentions Eileen Cannon and how he says most legal experts say if it wasn't for improper action by Eileen Cannon, it would have been decided much earlier. I agree Eileen Cannon's a hack. I don't agree that they wouldn't have legal mechanisms to prolong this thing into the future.
Yeah, there I would disagree. I think she was a political she was being, let me put it this way, her rulings seemed to be all pro-Trump. The
Yeah.
important seemed to be all pro-Trump. So she may have been a political judge. God knows there's plenty of political judges on the left. But you're right. I think that Trump could have maneuvered something to delay it even further. They still hadn't finished, when the case was dropped, some of the appellate issues that he was still raising in federal court. Just as one example, they didn't decide about Jack Smith's legitimacy as special counsel at that point. And
Well, that's true too. Then there's appeals and appeal bonds.
Wait.
Yeah. All right. So we've solved that problem, Jim and I. We figured that out, and there should never be any challenges again on this issue. It's summed up, it's completed, and that's it. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, he's dropping out of the race, which is going to make it a three-way race between Curtis the Beret Sliwa, the socialist Mondami, and Don Corleone Cuomo. Right? we've got going on in New York City. Right.
What a sad lineup.
It is. So Adams was corrupt. It appears he was corrupt. He wasn't convicted, but it appears he's corrupt. So he's out. Now we've got the ex-guardian angel who I used to see on Morton Downey Jr. show. And we've got the socialist. And it's one of those cases where it seems like there's people that want to side with Cuomo to prevent Mondami from getting into office. And you and I have talked about this. I'm not a big lesser of two evils guy. I'm just not. And
well, it depends. It really depends. If I don't see a difference, I think I'm very much like Ayn Rand in this sense.
It has to be a big difference is my point.
She saw Adlai Stevenson versus Dwight Eisenhower. She said, why the hell vote? It was really there's nothing to choose from there. Okay. But if she saw even someone she had been criticizing for years, Richard Nixon. I mean, in '64, she told Playboy he is the ultimate pragmatist and Me Tooer, and I disapprove of both, and he's the worst on both grounds.
Me Too meant something different back then.
It did. Me Too is not sexual harassment, but Republicans caving in to the increasing welfare state. And yet, she said, up against McGovern, Nixon is to be preferred. And or against even Hubert Humphrey, Nixon is to be preferred. But the difference had to be like that. And with McGovern, she thought the difference was striking enough. And I think in this case, I have to agree. If I was a resident of New York City, I would vote for Ronald McDonald if I thought that he would, if we could unify against a communist Islamist like Mamdani. I think Curtis Sliwa should get out of it. I would vote for I would vote for a ham sandwich before I would vote for Mamdani. And I would get behind to oppose Mamdani. It's not that I approve of Cuomo. Cuomo is a truly evil human being. Now think about that. I'm saying I will vote for a truly evil human being before I would let in an explicit Marxist anti.
Well, that's the key, right? Because Cuomo is a typical pragmatist Democrat.
Exactly. You could expect corruption. We could expect all kinds of political shenanigans. Oh, absolutely, with Cuomo, he is that kind of guy. He comes from his dad was a governor of New York and a rotten guy. So still, I think the difference here between Mamdani and Cuomo is the difference between same old Democrat versus this is a step in a really bad direction Democrat. So I would vote against Mamdani is what I would say. Whoever it was, I'd have to agree with the Wall Street Journal that I think Adams leaving the race was too late. I don't know that it would have had the impact. That Walden and Guy and Adams both of them should have realized earlier on that what we really want to do is prevent Mamdani from winning. But even in a two-way split, even if Curtis Lee were to jump out, I saw a poll this morning that said it's like 46-47, but it's only then that Cuomo has a 1-point advantage over Mamdani. So I still see Mamdani as the favorite. Curtis Lee should get out of it. But
of course he should.
But the others did not get out, I think, in time in any case. I fear that Mamdani is going to win the election.
I really hate when politicians do that. Both Marco Rubio and John Kasich in 2016 talked about how Trump could not be president, right? There was a point where Ted Cruz still had a chance to win. And it was before Florida and it was before Ohio. And Rubio chose to stay in and Kasich chose to stay in. And it was clear neither one of them was going to get it. Kasich's big hope was to force a brokered convention, right? When they do that, it's clear that they're putting their own political ambitions, which are delusional. Curtis Sliwa is not going to be the mayor of New York City. It's not going to happen, right? And so I haven't heard his speeches, but when politicians that don't go out there and talk about the public good and all that garbage, because that has nothing to do with your motivations.
Yeah, there's no question about it. That was the moment when they lost it to Trump within the Republican ranks in the 2016 primary. You're correct. It was that primary process where the other Republicans should have said, wait, if we do want to prevent this Trump guy from taking over, that was the moment. That was the moment. They needed to hang together and get most of those guys to drop out earlier, and they didn't. It was a very analogous situation. And you're right, even right before Florida and Ohio, they might have been able to pull it out and gotten someone other than Trump, but they hadn't done it yet. And they should have done it a whole lot sooner. They should have seen on the radar screen this blip, this threatening blip of Trump coming in nonstop, causing wreckage to the Republican Party. You know, he's still calling Ted Cruz Lion Ted Cruz and all that.
Little Marco, Lion Ted, all his stupid little nicknames.
If nearly all of them had gotten out except Ted Cruz and endorsed Cruz at an early phase,
right? There's this sort of, it's true, so I'm not going to call it mythology, but a woeful misinterpretation of what happened in 2016. People come out and say, oh, look how good Trump was, he beat 18 other competitors. 18. No, it was the fact that it was 18 that allowed him to win, because they divided the rest of the vote.
And remember how long it took through spring to get us down from 18 and then down to even so they completely split the vote. The traditional conservatives completely split the vote and waited way too long to get out of it so that there could be a focused opposition to Trumpism. And that's where they blew it. You're absolutely right.
I remember National Review did their magazine against Trump. And I remember, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was an analysis that was, they were on Meet the Press, and there was somebody from National Review and there was another Republican, Alex, I can't remember his name. But regardless, the guy says to him, too late. It's too late that you did this, that you came out against Trump. You can't wait until the end and then do it. It's too late. All right. It's the great man's birthday. Ludwig von Mises, my favorite economist. And in honor of him, I picked it. Oh my God. I sound like one of these guys in prison. I picked an article to discuss about banking. The article is in the left-wing rag, The Jacobin. And what they're complaining about is rules that, one of the things is rules that make it too hard for people to switch banks. But their main issue is with profit. They don't like the fact that banks are able to lend out at one interest rate and pay their depositors a different interest rate. Especially, they say that it's too big of a spread now. They're making too much of a profit, as if such a thing could ever be quantified, too much of a profit. But do
I like the Federal Reserve System?
No.
Doing that?
No.
Is that capitalism?
No, and that's what I'm going to ask you. That's where we're going to go. See, this is the biggest problem Jim Valliant ever has. Jim Valliant always wants to preempt what I'm going to say. He doesn't understand that with a talk show, you have to lead the audience a certain way. But Jim knows where I'm going, so he wants to come out like Mr. Excitement, that sort of thing. And it's his birthday. He's a little maybe more excited than usual. Probably threw back a few scotches this morning, even though it's only 9:30 in the morning over there.
I'm still kind of recovering. As I say, partying. My wife's birthday is yesterday. My birthday is today.
The wonderful Holly
29
Valiant.
years ago, I proposed to her at midnight, where our birthdays kissed. And so, we're out
awesome.
partying, and I'm still recovering, but I'm sober. Perhaps a little hungover, but I'm sober. I trust.
You're sober?
Okay.
Listen, when telling people you're not
so.
drunk, saying I'm sober might not be the way to go.
Philosopher, yes.
I'm quite sober. I haven't had any of that marijuana, right?
Oh, that marijuana.
So, Rahazam's birthday is Friday. We'll be sure to be here, and we'll wish you a happy birthday. So, Mises, he was a proponent of the gold standard, first of all, as Ayn Rand, and he also was warm, pretty good on free banking. First of all, Jim, what are your thoughts on free banking, the gold standard, and the chance of either of those things ever occurring in the United States of America?
Well, we never really had a proper monetary system in the United States of America.
No, it was better. It was
better. It was better. But from the outset, it is banking and monetary policy that was one of the great weaknesses of the American setup. We had the Bank of the United States. It wasn't quite as bad as,
here, Jim, this is The History of Money and Banking by one Murray Rothbard. What a great book this is in the history of banking. And you're right, we've never had a proper monetary standard.
And we kind of had a bimetallic standard, I guess, in the 19th century, excuse me. But free banking was sort of accidentally backed into in certain places, just as it was sort of accidentally backed into in Scotland during the Enlightenment, by the way. But experiences with free banking have shown, and my economics professor at NYU, Larry White, do check out his work on the history of free banking. I'm a huge advocate of free banking. He's a student of Mises, by the way. I'm a huge advocate of free banking, and I'm a huge advocate of commodity money, gold money in particular. Gold is the ideal money. And, Ludwig von Mises, to give credit where credit is due, when the marginal utility revolution was happening in economics in the last decades of the 19th century, they were beginning to understand markets in a scientific way, using marginal utility to understand them for the first time. Mises applied that to money and credit itself in his brilliant 1911 book, The Theory of Money and Credit.
12, Jim, you can't butcher it. 1912.
1912? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You think you're just going to get away with being close? Maybe if he hadn't been boozing it up all morning.
Boozing it up all night. No, I'm sure you're right. But in any case, look, it's over 110 years old. That's a 113-year-old book where the whole thing here was economics was put on a scientific basis. When Mises applied to money and credit, the marginal revolution, and that moment forward makes it really inexcusable for policy. It's ironic. The next year we got the Federal Reserve, right? Totally ironic. Mises, in his future works, understanding the impossibility of calculation under socialism, in his masterwork, Socialism, and his works around that time. Then theory and history, consider that. Mises altered and completed economics as a science. And if you have any doubts about the general idea of a free market in credit and money and banking, Mises has got to be your first go-to guy. Because face it, this is what causes the business cycle. The government intervention in money. Government and money should be separated like church and state should be separated. And so, and I happen to believe that on a free market, there's nothing that would beat gold for money. Gold will prevail and gold will be the money.
I'm glad you said that, Jim, because there's nothing magical about gold. It just happened to be that historically that's what evolved. But the reason it's good to have a commodity standard is because it completely removes it from human arbitrariness. It's completely contingent on how much gold they can mine, find, and put into the system. It has nothing to do with it. It makes money governed by supply and demand in essence, and not by the whims of Jerome Powell, Donald Trump, or Alan Greenspan.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. So I would absolutely put the government on a gold standard when it comes to their doing their business. And next, I would make it unlawful for the government to intervene in money, credit, banking at all, ever, at any time. Period. They shouldn't even have the power to pass a legal tender law, in my view, the federal government. So government and economics, as Ayn Rand said, should be separated like church and state, and basically for the same reason. People don't get that. But, on that same line of thinking, Mises was there too. He didn't have the moral argument. No, he didn't have the moral dimension. Yes, there are methodological issues with Mises. I understand all that. But he understood perfectly well that freedom was a unity. As I mentioned last time about censorship laws and drug laws, he understood the body's got to be free, the mind's got to be free. And in this, he shared a similar perspective with Ayn Rand in terms of get the government the hell out of it. As far as Mises was concerned, the less government had to do with banking and money, the better. And on that point, he was a prophet.
Interesting, Jim, is that Mr. Libertarian, Rothbard, thought that there should be 100% gold standard, and anybody that puts money out there other than that should be charged with fraud. It was interesting to me that he did not accept the idea of freedom when it came to money. I always was fascinated by that.
Absolutely. He was a rigid legalist when it came to 100% reserve banking. He would say it would be absolute fraud for any lending institution not to be on 100% gold. Whoa. If the bank discloses it, the reserve requirements to the customer, can't that be a contract between the customer and the bank?
Yes.
No. And so Mr. Anarchist, of all things, would have been a strict jurisprudential 100% gold is the only way you can do credit in the United States guy. That is, you're right, is very interestingly paradoxical. And at the time, I remember when he came out with his book on money and banking, back in the early 1980s, that's when I knew him. And I came to one of the very first, came to one of the first meetings of the Ludwig von Mises Institute, very first, where, I hid in the corner, but Murray Rothbard walked
And you
up.
met Ron Paul, correct?
Well, I hid in a corner because I was just a college student, and, I was just there to listen to the economists and stuff. Murray, who I knew at the time, gets a corner across the ballroom straight to me, sits at my table. And then his congressmen like Ron Paul and Phil Crane are coming. Jim, I want you to meet Congressman. How do you do? But that was a big bone of contention. Even at the very first meeting of the Ludwig von Mises Institute more than 40 years ago in Washington, D.C., the disagreement was between the free banking folks and Rothbard, the anarchist, who apparently believed that there should be strict legal control of credit. And my position with him was, even at the time, well, wait a minute, isn't it a contract between me and my bank? And I can't take that risk if they disclose to me honestly their reserve requirements. No, Jim, absolutely no. Got to be 100% gold.
Okay, so before you give your capitalist thought of the day, the wonderful Megan Ribbons says, precious metals have great chemical properties for currency. They're malleable, infinitely divisible, hard, slow corrosion. They also are easy to carry. And that is another great point. Okay. Akira Felix wants to know, how many Rothbard books do I own? I own 2. Well, it depends. On my Kindle, I have another one. I own 2, plus there's essays from him and other books that I have. I used to own the Libertarian Manifesto and Man, Economy, and State as well, but I no longer do own them. All right, Jim?
Man, Economy, and State is worth checking out. It is, Mises himself said it was the definitive commentary on his own work.
Oh, that was an awesome, awesome book. I may get in trouble for this, but I think that both Mises and Rothbard are superior to George Reisman's Capital. I really do. I think Reisman gets a lot wrong in Capital.
Well, he was trying to do something, reconcile classical economics with Austrian economics, and in some ways that can't be done. I'll concede that. Brilliant economist, George.
Oh, I thought the book was great. I love the book Capitalism. Don't get me wrong.
Examples from which ordinary people can actually.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I just think that his trying to resurrect the cost of production theory of value is wrongheaded. That's my main disagreement with him.
Yeah.
But his explication of Say's law, in defense of Say's law, I thought was absolutely superb. But I'm going to lose viewers because once you start mentioning Say's law, people are like, okay, I'm going to lunch. So Jim, give your capitalist thought of the day, and happy birthday again to the wonderful Jim Valliant.
as in tribute to the birthday to the truly great Ludwig von Mises, perhaps the greatest economist who ever lived, I just want to point out that honest money is gold, is commodity money. Once the government intervenes and interrupts or disrupts or distorts the relationship between the value of commodities themselves, they've stuck their nose into where they ought not to be. They will cause distortion. They'll cause malinvestment. Ludwig von Mises' term, by the way, for it. Not overinvestment that inflation causes, but malinvestment that will at some point have to be liquidated. So in honor of Ludwig von Mises, I think the capitalist thought of the day should be only a commodity can actually serve as money. And among the commodities, for certain physical reasons, gold is the best. On the other hand, the government ought not to have anything to do with money, banking, or credit. Neither the value of money, nor legal tender acceptance, nor regulating banks and interfering with their relationship with their customers. That should all be decided on the free market. Capitalism is a system, yes, where we want an objective standard for economic value. That requires commodity money. We also are believers in freedom, and we think the free market should decide what the rates of interest are, how banks interact with their customers. Capitalism is the system of honest money, where the government can't reach into your bank account and steal its value simply through monetary policy, which is what they've been doing consistently since the start of the Fed, and in earnest since the Bretton Woods system and its collapse at the end of World War II. For the last 75 years, we've been living under an inherently inflationary system, where the Fed thinks it's a great idea if your dollar loses 2%, only 2% of its value every year in a cumulative added tax on ordinary purchasers. No, that is corrupt. That is immoral. Inflation is the most insidious kind of tax there is. And yet our system has been built on this inflation embedded system now all of my life. Capitalism is the opposite, ladies and gentlemen, where consumers and producers are the ones who decide economic outcomes, not the government, including when it comes to money and credit.
Now that, sir, was awesome. And I have to tell you, we've gotten in today Say's Law, Bretton Woods. All we needed was throw in a little Jekyll Island, and then we would have hit the trifecta.
Would have hit it all.
Jim, thank you so much for being here on your birthday. Happy birthday again, my brother. And everybody, remember, share the episode from YouTube, like the episode, subscribe to the show, tell your friends about it, buy the merch, check out AmericanCapitalistParty.org. And here's my question. Jim and I today, we spent an awful lot of time talking about law and economics. And I'm just curious, what have you learned from watching the Capitalist Corner? Remember, you have to go to YouTube and comment. There's a specific reason I want you to do that, because it helps with the algorithm. So, but I want to know, what specifically from listening to this show, watching the show, have you learned about law and economics? We will be back here again tomorrow, my friends. Until then, remember to always check your premises. Peace.